Sarah, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hi, it's great to be here. So my name's Sarah Mackris, and essentially I am an executive coach with around 20 years experience managing C-suite reputations. What I suppose I'm really passionate about is helping accomplished professionals to build powerful brands. They're seen as leaders in their industry. It can be really frustrating. I'm sure, we've all been there when you feel like you're not being recognised or for all the great work that you do. So what I do is help you be seen by the right people so that you can accelerate and future-proof your professional life.
That sounds really amazing. I think that's very important. As you said, like if people don't have the right visibility to their own personal brand, it's hard to really move up the ladder or, to get another job or get clients these days. That's extremely important.
Definitely.
Can you maybe share a little bit about what was the journey like going from corporate HR to personal branding?
Yeah, sure. So it was actually in corporate communication. So my background is public relations, and I spent 15 years in-house, so working for large corporates at the executive level, advising them on managing their reputation, the company reputation. Did a lot of crisis management and issues management and investor relations and government relations, which I think you call lobbying over in the US. And that was great. I loved my career. But then it came to a point where I decided to have kids and I thought, what am I going to do with myself? I knew corporate wasn't going to be quite right. At a certain point, for some women, you have to make a family decision rather than just one that suits you. So I decided, my husband has a business too, and I decided that I couldn't go back to the corporate world, didn't really want to go back to the corporate world and do the give it the same sort of commitment that I had in terms of the hours and the travel. So I thought, what am I going to do? I wasn't really sure. I was a bit of a crossroads. So my whole life I had wanted to be a fashion designer. So I went and did fashion design while I was on mat leave. And then I realised that will always stay a hobby. And about the same time, my sister launched her own brand. So that was funny because it was sort of like two sort of different paths happening. And then I started a fashion blog. So fashion was a big thing. And then I really started to really miss what I was doing in the corporate world. I loved it. And although I'd made the decision that I probably wouldn't want to go back, I still realised that there was a massive gap there for those people who weren't at that very, very, very top level, the CEOs of the companies, but also weren't middle managers. They were aspiring C-suites, really accomplished professionals, but they didn't have this visibility. And nowadays, 10 years later, it's just expected that everybody have a brand. And if you're serious about your career or your business, that you're out there, that you're visible, that you're really sort of focusing on it. And I think from my perspective, it was like, well, not everybody has a whole corporate communications team behind them. So now I work with individuals one-on-one, and most people are very surprised to know that 99% of my clients pay for my services themselves, so they don't have their organisation pay for it. And I also work with a lot of clients who are looking to leave corporate or have left corporate and starting their own business. And that can be a real challenge because I know when I first started, I hadn't really thought about branding myself. I'd sort of been very much a behind-the-scenes person. I'd done a lot of great work, but it was all about making other people look good. And so I was like, Lord, I have to actually do this, A, to build my business, but also to practice what I preach. So everything I've done, I also do it in the light of this is something I would want my clients to do. I need to be doing this, pushing myself out of my comfort zone all the time.
That's great. For people in the audience who don't know exactly what really is personal branding, can you maybe explain a little bit more? What does personal branding really include?
Yeah.
And also maybe touch upon why is personal branding so important for executives and professionals today?
Yeah, absolutely. So personal branding in general, so there's a lot of misconceptions. So there's a lot of people who will say personal branding is about what you wear, or, it's a bit like when I was in public relations, when I used to do PR, people would say customer service was PR, which it's not. But there's all these sort of different sort of, I suppose, what fits. For some people will say that that's what it is. But personal branding is really about how you show up in the world. So what you're known for, how visible you are, how well known you are. And when it comes to executives and also business owners, it's got to be aligned to what your goal is. So if your goal is to be a CIO, Chief Intelligence Officer or Chief IT, whatever those sort of C-suite roles are, they're all named different things. Then you need, or Chief Information Officer is the word I was looking for. So if you're wanting to be like that and you're sort of at that second rung down, then building your brand around and becoming seen as an authority in your industry is really important. So your brand, your corporate brand or your executive brand is all around the things that you need to be known for in order to get that next level job. I like to sort of describe it like this. If you had two candidates, and this goes for business as well. If you've got two people, let's just say candidates for a top role, they've both got great experience, both had, say, let's say 20 years experience. They've both got fantastic qualifications and degrees and executive education, but one of them has a really strong brand in the market and is seen as an authority. Which one do you think they're going to go for? Because often people think it's fine to just leave their LinkedIn profile, out of date, or not to be speaking at events, or not to be really building that brand. But the gap becomes really obvious for a recruiter, especially when it is, if you haven't built one brand to where if you have. And it's the same with a business. When you think about people logging on, wanting to find out information about somebody, they're thinking about working with someone, they're naturally going to go to the people who have the biggest profile, at least initially.
You kind of touched upon LinkedIn. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the business world, they kind of like live on LinkedIn. And I think from a business perspective, that's the only platform you really need to be on. I mean, what is your opinion about that? I mean, obviously LinkedIn is important, but is that like everything in the branding, like from a business perspective, or is business branding more than just, having a LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, so I think this is true for executives and for business owners. Like your ground zero, if you can think about it like that, you must have a LinkedIn, because it's the first thing that pops up when someone Googles your name, especially if you don't have a website. And especially if you don't really have much of an online presence. It's a really easy way to establish yourself online. One of the things a lot of people don't realise is that when you publish articles or newsletters, that actually goes in your SEO search. Whereas if you just post on LinkedIn, they just disappear. So if you're creating articles and you've got a great LinkedIn profile and you're quite active, then that's actually contributing to your Google search and your online presence overall as well, even if you don't have a website. So in my view, LinkedIn is very powerful because it's where everyone who you want to do business with hangs out.
Maybe since you've been doing this for many years, can you maybe talk about what are some the biggest misconceptions executives or business owners have when it comes to personal branding?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things around why people don't do it. Because there's a big group in that space, and then there's the things around why they sort of avoid it. So I think some people think, look, my work should speak for itself. Or I'm fine. I'm not looking for a job. I don't really need to be bothering with this stuff. There's probably two of the biggest, I suppose, mixed truths, because the reality is nowadays it's not about, just how hard you work, but also when you get to a certain level in your career, it's not just about I'm really good at my job, because you're expected to be really good at your job when you're being paid a lot of money and you're doing a great, and you're at a certain level. But what separates you is your influence and the way that you're seen. So your positioning and whether you're seen as a leader in your industry. Two of those things that you have control over. So they're sort of two things that I think people sort of think, oh, That's fine. I don't need to do it now. But the reality is as well is that if you are looking for a role, don't wait till you need a role. Like this is like career insurance. You're actually building your brand is something that you're doing as an investment in your career and your future. But the other thing you mentioned was what are the misconceptions? I suppose some people will say, well, I don't have time, oh my God, it's too much time. And it doesn't have to be, initially you need to think about your positioning and your thing, but it's really part of your marketing and you have to market yourself. The other one I hear is, I've got nothing new to say. Everybody's said it all before. I'm just adding to the noise. And but nobody's heard it from you and the way you talk about it and the way you talk about your topic. And it's all adding up to the sort of fullness of you as a brand. There is another one, and I'm just trying to think what the other one. I'm too busy. I'm too busy. I don't have time. I suppose that's sort of very similar. It's all been said before. The other one I know now is I don't want to be that person on LinkedIn. That person everyone cringes at. And that's because there's a right way and a wrong way to do to brand, to do promotion, to marketing yourself. It's about adding value to your industry, it's not just about shameless self-promotion.
Great. I mean, so now that we're talking about LinkedIn a bunch, and now that you've you've worked with a lot of clients, what do you see as some either the biggest mistakes or things that people overlook on LinkedIn?
Oh, yeah. First of all, a lot of people overlook the importance of their about section. The most important, but actually the about section is incredibly important. It should be future focused. So it shouldn't just be about reiterating your resume, or I've seen people just list a whole heap of skills. That's not engaging because people want to come to your about section and think, oh, this sounds interesting. I would like to connect with this person. They sound like they'd be a good person to be connected to. So that's an important part of your resume. Of your LinkedIn profile. Then the other part is that headline. That should be really engaging. Not just your title. You should put some things in there that, ideally some things you want to be known for. And one of the biggest things that I see is not having testimonials. The amount of LinkedIn profiles that I see, and I think, where's the testimonials? Where's the social proof from the people that you've worked with that have written on your wall and said great things about you? And I think that's about also sharing that with other people, like writing on other people's walls and telling other people. So your name is suddenly appearing on other people's shop fronts. But you asked a question before about other ways of personal branding, not just LinkedIn. And one of my favorite things is podcasts. Podcasts are a fantastic way to get yourself out there and get to know more people. And we were talking about that the other day. And also, obviously, there's media, there's white papers, there's webinars. You can host your own roundtables. Thought leadership, obviously, incredibly important. Speaking at events, creating articles and newsletters on LinkedIn. So there's lots of ways out. Going to events and asking, if you can speak at an event or a panel. All of these things contribute to your brand building.
Do you have your own podcast?
I did have one. I had one called Career Success Coach, and I've actually done one season of it, and I'm about to reboot my next season. So stay tuned. It's in the next. It'll be in the next month or so that I'm relaunching that. And also for those who do want who are interested in LinkedIn, I do have a LinkedIn checklist, which I'm happy to provide to you, Daniel, and in your notes if you like, and people can grab that if they like. It's just free.
I appreciate that. I mean, we're all about giving value to the audience and everything. So thank you so much for offering that to everybody. I mean, the big talk now is AI. Everybody's talking about AI. It's wherever you go, everybody's talking about AI, especially in business and marketing. It's always seems to be one of the top topics to talk about these days. I mean, do you feel that people can use things like ChatGPT, which some people say is robotic? Is there a way to maybe utilize it like in a more humanized way, or not really? You still have to, have an actual person, say, check like your LinkedIn profile. You can't just say ChatGPT, create a LinkedIn profile for me and, do all the work for me.
Yeah, it's a bit like the argument around LinkedIn profile writers or ghostwriters, which I actually think are better than AI. So, but I think nothing beats yourself. Nothing beats you writing it, because you know when something. I mean, you could get someone to draft it, but ultimately you have to write it in the end. It has to have your flavour, and I think there's a bit of a challenge at the moment, particularly on LinkedIn, is that everybody's sort of testing the AI posts and all that sort of stuff. So they're looking very formulaic. There's a lot of AI in the comments. There's a lot of challenges around that space. My view is you want to make AI should be an assistant, not the actual doer. It doesn't replace you. And I think AI is great for things like, can you give me 3 great headlines that would go with this post I've just written, or can you suggest some ways to improve this post, or give me some stats that might support this post. So there's that element of it, which I think you have to maintain your own personality. That's probably the biggest thing with AI is the posts that remain, that it's becoming more and more important that you show and share your personality and your story, far more important than it ever used to be because of AI. So we've always banged on about, storytelling and how important it is, but now it's even more important. And the authenticity part comes from the personality and the storytelling. But I do think AI has a fantastic role to play as a fantastic assistant.
Well, now that like AI, a lot of people are using AI, they think in their mind, it's like, hey, I don't need to hire, like you said, like a ghostwriter or maybe anything else. I can just do everything myself with AI. So for people who have that type of mindset, why should they consider like hiring like a personal branding expert such as yourself? Like, you may explain, like, what exactly do you bring to the table to help executives or business professionals with their personal branding that they couldn't just get quickly in like a quick prompt on ChatGPT?
Yeah. So, from my perspective, I have a methodology that I use called Shine. And what I do, and I suppose where I differentiate from your typical, say, marketer, or I'm not HR, I'm not marketing, I'm a strategic communications professional. So what I really focus on is positioning, which is something that AI is not really. I think the nuances of that is different. But I also think that they don't. The other thing I spend a lot of time with, which I think a lot of people underestimate, is the networking side, or how to strategically build your networks and how positioning feeds into that. So that's another element of what I do particularly, and navigating the corporate challenges that can come up with positioning and with trying to achieve your goal. So there's a lot of other elements. But in terms of the simple side of things, like in terms of the actual process, it's, there's your goals. Like, what are your goals? What are you actually trying to be? What's your brand today in the market? Where do we want to take that? And then what's your value proposition? What's your what do you want to be known for? What do you need to be known for in order to achieve what you want? Who are your strategic networks? How do we work through what those networks are so that you are positioned properly? Because a lot of people are missing their strategic networks, and they sort of rely on old networks or old, people that they used to know, but they actually haven't adjusted and repositioned themselves in the eyes of the people that they need to be known by. And then, so there's a lot of work done that requires a lot of reflection, self-reflection, and really aligning yourself with that goal. And then it's about leveraging, saying, okay, we're ready to go to market now. We've got all our ducks lined up. Where's the best bang for our buck? Because no one's got, especially executives, they do not, that's not their business. So they don't have time to spend 3 days a week marketing themselves. So it's all about, how do we make sure that this is the most effective use of time, we're positioning ourselves correctly. So a lot of other elements come into it, not just turning up at events or, going on podcasts or writing thought leadership. There's other elements, behind the scenes elements, I suppose, where some of my other skills come into play.
That's excellent. I mean, you're making it a great explaining why it's so well, like, why really human beings are still needed, because there's still that human element that, at this point, AI, ChatGPT can't really do. Like, I mean, you said it's as good as an assistant, but it still has a lot of its own limitations.
Yeah, and I think, do you remember when Upwork and Fiverr and all of those came online, and people were like, oh wow, now you can make a website for $5, or you can find somebody to do it for really cheap. But the reality is if you don't know how to brief them and you don't know what you want and what you need and how that feeds into, you haven't got that experience and expertise, then it's only as good as what you know. So I always think about it like that as well. You can't build a great website if you just have to give the directions, but you don't know what the directions are. So
now, like you kind of mentioned about potential different clients you work with, like people, executives, C-suite, like department heads, as well as like entrepreneurs, business owners. I mean, for all those types of people, I mean, is personal branding the same across the board, or is do you have to do personal branding differently for somebody in the C-suite executive versus somebody who's a business owner?
Yeah, definitely. So everyone I work with has a different goal. Some people are wanting a promotion. Some people are wanting, to start their own business. Some people are just wanting to be more visible in their industry, so they've got more opportunities. And even if they have the same similar goal, it's always a different strategy, because it's the person also and what they're comfortable with. And some people love the idea of being really, really visible and taking it to that sort of really high level. And others are just happy, I just want to be a bit more visible on LinkedIn. Or our strategy might be just an in-person strategy around networking and strategic networking and playing that sort of more behind the scenes game. So it's really around positioning and tailored strategies for that person and that individual. But often what happens is we've got so much knowledge locked up inside that part of that work is around pulling all of that out and going, well, what do we actually want to be known for here, and how do we actually articulate that so that it sounds interesting, but also adds to your positioning as a credible authority in your industry.
And you kind of mentioned before also that sometimes you work with people that they may be currently a corporate executive, but are thinking about leaving the corporate world to start their own business or maybe shift into a different track in their life. What advice could you give to those people from like a branding perspective, like maybe 2 or 3 points of like suggestions of what they should consider or do? Or
okay, so I have a lot of people who, if I asked all of my clients what their 5 to 10 year goal would be, it would be, most of them would say portfolio career, epilogue economy. I don't know if you've heard those terms before, but where you have a little bit of you might work a couple of days a week, you might do a couple of consulting, you might spend a bit of time on the playing golf, you might be on a board, so it's a mixed match of careers. So that would be after corporate. So they would a lot of people would cite that as a goal. But when my clients have a goal of being in starting their own business, the first thing I start with them is around, so what are you going to be doing in that business in 3 years' time? What skills do you want to leverage that you're currently, because all my clients obviously want to leverage the skills they have. It's not like they're going to go start a cupcake shop. They're going to actually go and they're going to use their skills. So what are those skills you plan to use in the next 3 years or 4 years or 5 years? You need to make sure that brand is built around that. And and absolutely, without a doubt, start building that brand and those networks before you need them. So that's number one. Figure out what you want to be known for and start doing thought leadership. Start creating posts, start posting online, start sharing your knowledge, particularly around the topic that you plan to be selling at some point.
Can you maybe share a few examples of some of the clients that you've helped so people have a better idea of what to expect? maybe some of the wins that your clients got from working with you?
Yeah, I'm happy to share one of my clients who she actually took a redundancy during COVID. She was working in a shared services space, and she was the GM of a particular area. She had a really varied career. And she decided to, she thought, you know what, this is the perfect opportunity, as annoying as it is to have this situation. I'm going to use this opportunity to reposition myself and to start thinking about what I might like next. And what she decided was she wanted to move into STEM. Now, she didn't have a background in STEM at all. She's a very smart cookie, so she's obviously, very interested in this space. But what she did was we worked together to reposition her, and she got very focused on sharing her knowledge around what she was learning in this space. And then she started creating some strategic networks around this space, so in the STEM space, robotics and space. And she's now, a couple of years later, she's been with a space company who put vehicles on the moon, and she's doing incredibly well over there. So that's sort of one in terms of repositioning. Another client of mine repositioning is a big thing, but another client of mine, Kate, she left her company a year and a half ago, and she was in marketing. Felt like it was the time was right. And she has been kicking great goals with her company. So what we focused on with her was think again, what does she want to be known for? What do her clients need to know about her and her services? And how do we create interesting content? And it's not always just about content, but who do we need to know? The business development side, obviously, as well. But who do we need to know? Who needs to see our content? How do we be consistent with the message, having the right message as well? And so she's doing great things around the community engagement and marketing and sponsorship and so forth as well.
Great. Now, have you worked with somebody that wanted to get promoted within the same company? Like, what advice can you give to like the audience of somebody who, they feel stuck at the current position, they want to move up? Is there any advice you can give to people like that?
Yeah. So that's definitely people I work with in that space as well. I think the biggest thing about that is repositioning. You've got to reposition yourself as the person who is actually ready for that role. So often what happens is people spend so much time looking down, busy, I'm doing the work, but they actually need to spend at least 15% of the time looking up and managing their networks and working through and so we do a process around stakeholder mapping, and there's a big sort of piece of work behind that, but that really helps identify who it is you need to know. But a lot of times as well, people don't actually say what they want. So I always encourage people, like if you've got a boss who's really open to it, or you've got somebody in your organisation, ask them for help. Say, this is my goal. This is where I want to be. And I have had lots of, people work for me over the years in corporate, and it's really refreshing when you know that you're ambitious and you want to help people, and most people want to help people. So be vocal about what you want. Say it out loud. Own it. Ask for help.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I was curious to know, with somebody with your fashion background, how does style and image play, what roles do they play in the brand presence?
So I do offer with my clients work. We do a lot of work around executive presence. And so executive presence is more around the communication style, the way you communicate, which is huge. It's one of the major indicators of future career success. But coupled with that, it's great. Most people I recommend to at least visit a stylist regularly, so I work with a number of different stylists who I recommend to my clients. And because I think it makes a massive difference. It really does. When you feel confident about how you show up and what you're wearing and how you look, you feel better in terms of how you project and how you hold yourself. And then I work around the communication style and how you talk, how you present, how you interact with people, what you say.
Yeah. So if somebody's a CEO, an author, and a thought leader, how do you balance visibility with authenticity?
So if they're a CEO, author. So it depends, right? So if you're a CEO, you're probably the CEO of your own company. If you're an author and and what was the last bit you said? And the thought leadership. Yeah. You potentially could be, but there's a lot of CEOs out there who are, it's probably depends what kind of industry you're in. Like if you're in an ASX company, it's probably a little bit harder for you to be. Some do. Some are fantastic at it. Putting out your thought leadership, which I actually think you should do. But if you're trying to they have a lot more focus on them visibility-wise. But if you're a CEO who's looking to get more focus, then you should absolutely be sharing your thought leadership. And I always think that it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And it's about finding opportunities to leverage the things that are already happening in your business, ideally, if you're at that CEO level. But people want to see a bit of you as well. So it's always about bringing that personality in and sharing that. And I think that's what's so wonderful about the world today is actually it's okay for CEOs to have multiple dimensions in their personality. It's not like they just have to always be seen in a suit, which is sort of what it was like about 15 years ago.
And one of my last questions for you was, there's still a lot of portion of society, they're afraid to put themselves out there. They don't want to be on camera. They're afraid of being seen. What advice can you give to people like that?
So there's a lot of people I speak to who are scared of, when I say scared, I feel uncomfortable about posting on LinkedIn. Like that is an uncomfortable feeling. And then I've got people who post on LinkedIn all the time but don't want to do video. And then I've got people who happy to do video but don't want to do podcasts. So to me, it's always about pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, because that's where you grow. So it's going to feel uncomfortable initially. And that's what I suppose I'm there to help my clients do that, by helping them with their content or reviewing it or making them feel comfortable with what they're sharing is actually fantastic, because they're fantastic and they're experienced and knowledgeable. So there's a little bit of that, but it's going to feel, no matter what you do, even when my son just got his learners, and I know. I'm like saying to my husband, "You're taking him driving, not me." But it's always uncomfortable initially. Everything is, but it's better to say yes and deal with the getting over the discomfort after. That's my strategy anyway.
So if somebody is, needs some personal branding help, or they have questions about this interview, or they want to get in touch, what's the best ways of getting in touch with you?
Okay, well, LinkedIn, surprise, surprise, Sarah, LinkedIn. And also I'm on Instagram at Sarah Mackris Australia. I've got some stuff on YouTube, and it's Career Success Coach, but my website's 𝐿_mackris.com.au.
I just wanted to ask you an important question, because you said you're based in Australia, but do you only work with clients in Australia? Do you also work with clients United States, in America, UK, Europe?
Absolutely, yeah. I work with clients all over. So I do all online. So even my clients in Melbourne are online. That way I can service everybody who all my clients, because I have clients everywhere, which is wonderful. I love it.
Great. So, to end the podcast, was there anything else you want to discuss, or final words you want to leave the audience with?
I suppose my main thing is to build your brand before you need to rely on it. I see a lot of people out there who might be in a situation where they think, oh no, I better go and network with some people because I want to get a new role. But if you do it consistently, it doesn't have to be complex, just consistently show up, and just you're probably fine on Facebook. So maybe it's time to just start taking that professional lens as well, and showing up in that way as well.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the podcast and sharing all your wisdom. It's obvious that you have a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge about communications and branding. And, I'm sure a lot of people from the audience will get a lot out of this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd love to, anyone who wants to connect on LinkedIn, I'd love to hear if you've got value from this as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much.